us. They just kind of.
Enemy in the container.
Oh well. Thank you for pretty much confirming what I just said.
Where I am right now, I resided somewhere in Minnesota. It's cold. It's like negative 18 degrees outside right now.
80 pop song.
My first job was on Madden 20.
Well, everybody, happy Sunday, happy Monday, whichever day you're watching this. I'm pretty excited about having an opportunity to sit down with 2-4 and kind of your audience. I think that, some of the content that's really driving my passion right now is about meeting the gaps that people are experiencing in their day-to-day things. Like, there's so many different things that we're struggling through and realizing that I think that we've just blanket stamped everything as a mental health problem, when in fact it's just more of a mental strategy problem, really. And if we can have effective strategies in doing things, I think we win. I think more of us will win when we're together and we're partnered and doing it in community. And that's really my core focus.
You told me that, you do a lot of coaching and you kind of coach a bunch of different things. Kind of how did that even kind of come about, as far as you wanting to coach people or wanting to kind of, expound on these sort of ideas?
I think everything for me comes back to being a dad. I've wanted to be a dad. Well, I am a dad. I have been a dad. I'm now a granddad, if you can imagine it. Like, look at this face. I mean, I don't look like a grandfather, but I'm about to, my grandson's going to be a year old in like a month. It's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I knew from early on that I really wanted to be a dad. And I love teaching. I love educating. I love partnering and coming alongside people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my first venture was, we had somebody really significant come into our life and just help us parent.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us the tools in order not to tell us what to do, but help us understand how to do it better.
Right.
And that was that was the first ingredient that really drove me. And so I've done parenting partnerships and coaching. I've done business. I've done personal development. And now, I mean, thank you, pandemic. And I don't know how many people can actually say that, but I'm in esports.
Mm-hmm.
I've played video games. I mean, as much as I love parenting, I was a terrible dad for more than a decade. I was lost in Azeroth. If some of your audience may know what I'm talking about, but I was just like, one more quest, kids, one more quest. And I'd find them asleep in their street clothes on their bed.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was my job to get them into BJ's and get them ready for bed. And I was so lost in video games. And I've tried a bunch of different games. I've been on the front end of a lot of things, because back in the late 90s, there wasn't much to play from a community context. And as the internet really took off, and I'm like, yes, I'm 50, so I'm pre-internet. I'm a pre-internet kid, guys. So don't judge me too harshly. But I saw like the birth of YouTube and the birth of Instagram and the birth of Twitter. Like, I saw the beginnings of these things. And I see the growing pains that we've lived through. And if we really look at the idea of how esports got started, this is one of the most significant gaps, in my opinion, is coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all areas of coaching. And so, again, coming back to the mental health strategies, like, I don't coach people in their micro. Either you can play the game or you can't play the game.
Right.
But when we talk about understanding the macro reality of what it means to be an esports player, what it means to understand your teammates, how to understand in the game, out of the game, what are the objectives of life? What are the objectives of my game? What do I have to get done and what do I have to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
And so today I love esports and I love student development. That's 16 to 24 years old. That has been my wheelhouse for almost 30 years now. Worked in 4 different generations. So it's a pretty wild thing.
And so to kind of, as these sort of, especially that age range, these kids are, starting to look at and approach gaming and esports as a whole a little bit differently than they probably did, 10 years ago, where, they were probably just playing and they really didn't think of it as a career path, or they didn't, really think about, or parents maybe even didn't think about the dollars that are generated in order for their kids to be able to do it as a career. Kind of how have you seen kind of that, that explosion of esports as we start to slowly but surely start to put it in schools, and slowly but surely start to have people like you who are coaching people and say, hey, this can be a career, this can be something that you can actually do with your life?
Well, I think that, we look back and we see League of Legends kind of taking a grip in the in the Asia market in 2009, 2008. It's really starts getting some traction, and it's got a very small audience, and things are present, and things are growing almost exponentially. And then Overwatch hits the scene in 2015, and it explodes. 2.5 years later, Fortnite shows up, and Epic Games fundamentally changed esports. Like, Overwatch was the first organized reality around what it meant to have a franchise and a team and to have fans and everything else. But what Fortnite and Epic Games did, which their story is amazing, in that they were 30 days from insolvency. Releasing building into the PvP mode was almost accidental. Like, it was only supposed to be for their zombie version, their save the world version of the game. It was never intended for live populace. All of a sudden it happened, and boom, it explodes. And so I'm kind of managing a player development kind of component within a guild or in a community at the time. And all of a sudden, Epic Games drops this: we're going to pay $100 million in the next 12 months. And we're going to host multiple tournaments every single weekend. That meant that anybody that showed up walked away with $100. Every kid all of a sudden was able to say, I got paid to play video games. Mom, Dad, look. And it changed the conversation. And then we get into 2020, and the unfortunate reality of what happens with a global pandemic. Everyone was forced to sit at home.
Right.
So we have pre-pandemic. So this is January of 2020. All the economists get together and they're like, okay, esports is growing. It's never had a better year than 2019. What do we think is going to happen? And they list it as a $23 billion industry in January of 2020.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But one that was really crazy is in July, because no one was at work, everybody was on the internet playing video games. It 100x the entire industry. It went from 23 billion to 126 billion. 100. It just blew the lid off everything. And salaries went through the roof, and venture capitalism got involved, and yeah, it was wild. But then the product started to devolve because they were no longer allowed to do in-person stuff. So then everything was on the internet, and everything was weird and crazy and odd, to be honest. But there were so many eyeballs on that. And I'm going to tell some stories in a little bit about kind of like the dangers that exist within the space. But, to stay in this vein right now, like, esports and the gaming industry has never looked back from January 2020.
Right.
It is only seen growth. It is only seen massive amounts of development. We went from 2018, we went from 280 million people playing video games, 280 million globally, to 3.1 billion by July 2020. That's 2 years.
Right.
280 million, 1.3 billion with a B, with a big giant B on that. Like, it's wild. Everybody's playing a game now.
Exactly.
And how do these developers? They make money the instant that they make a competitive version of your game. So every single game, like, look at Fall Guys. It literally blew up and fell. Right? People were playing it like mad for a minute, buying the skins, because those free-to-play games, that's how they hook you.
Right.
And so these games are just crazy. Is
Yeah.
the economics of it all never made sense.
Right. And that's why when we were talking about, the gaming industry is bigger than the movie industry. It's bigger than the music industry, like combined. I mean, just the amount of, you know, dollars that are being generated from, just from some of these tournaments. And so, you go to these tournaments and you can make more money than you ever could have imagined these days. Now,
Now, okay,
starting to
but
open back up.
what we're talking about there's a catch there,
Right.
because that's not actual real money.
Mm-hmm.
That's investment capital. That's not actual fan generated money. And this is one of the core problems
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, what what Epic Games did by dumping $100 million, that was to avoid taxes. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Their game literally blew up, and they're in the billions of dollars of income because of their skin. You know how you buy skins, buy V-Bucks, and buy your skins and everything else, and so they needed to offload their tax threshold. That's where the tournament winnings came from.
Mm-hmm.
But the what we're seeing in these small amateur style tournaments is we're seeing venture capitalist money that's not actually being recouped. And this is where we're starting to see the shift and the imbalance exist. We were talking before we started to record about, wouldn't it be amazing if every single high school had an esports league?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, that can't happen because of the way in which venture capitalists controls all the dollars in esports.
Mm-hmm.
They won't let amateur esports exist because it can become like the college football scene versus the NFL. There are many that believe that the NCAA and what they've crafted is a better product than the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a huge traditional sports fan, so it's irrelevant to me. But this is the nature. Like, we have an unnamed organization here in Canada that just buys small, tiny little esport grassroots stuff up like it means nothing to anybody,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want that grassroots level of competition, which is unfortunate. It's terrible.
So where do you think, like, where's that inflection point? Where does that kind of I guess get better? Or where do you see where those pitfalls that you mentioned, like how do we get past some of those? How do we get to the point to where maybe some of the more amateur tournaments and more amateur folks can kind of get more of a foothold in the industry?
I think realistically, it's people like you that are willing to have conversations with people that are not famous. No one knows who I am. And part of me likes it that way.
Right.
But I think that, more people that are willing to have conversations at a scale that I want the athletic director of a high school in Oklahoma to watch this video.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want them to know that the investment in the athletic varsity reality of what esports can be can take the kid that's running a 1.8 GPA and get them to a 3.7 GPA just because you gave them something that was important in school.
Mm-hmm.
Because that kid's not going to play football, soccer, rugby, baseball, but my goodness, can he play Call of Duty?
Right.
Right? And maybe Call of Duty is a little too aggressive for some people, but Overwatch,
Mm-hmm.
right? If not Overwatch, then Fortnite. If not Fortnite, then League of Legends. And there's so many great things that as coaches, I want an opportunity for every student to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, like I was in a gathering. I got invited down to California, and I spoke at an event. We had like 55 coaches from primarily soccer and wrestling, some
Mm-hmm.
martial arts and that. And this one guy speaks up to me. He says, "Why are you advocating for kids to play video games?" I'm like, whoa. I am not advocating for them to play video games at all. I think they're terrible. They're toxic. They're malnourished. Like, kids aren't becoming whole human beings while playing esports.
Mm-hmm.
My contention is all of the kids 3 years ago that signed up for soccer, they're not signing up for soccer anymore.
Right.
They're all playing video games in their spare time. So we need to go now as coaches, as leaders, as developers, because if we truly care for kids, then we have to go to where the kids are.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a big moment to realize that the kids that we are ultimately trying to serve need us. The
Mm-hmm.
community of gaming and esports needs parents,
Mm-hmm.
needs people that care for kids, that don't have dollar signs in their eyes like in the cartoons, right? Like, I'm not here to make a buck off this kid. I want this kid to have an opportunity. And I have an amazing graphic that I'm going to send to you guys, that if anybody sends you an email about this message, I want you to send them this graphic. And it basically is a career map. And the original document comes from the Miami Heat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, so in the very center, it says esports related jobs, but it used to say Miami Heat. And the idea was, these are all of the jobs that it takes to create a championship team.
Gotcha.
And on one of the sections, it's in the color of purple, and it's like 3 lists down, and it's hardware supplier. Right? And it's like, so from the NBA perspective, as they're pulling the balls out on those carts,
mm-hmm.
right, and a wheel breaks, you need a hardware supplier to be able to fix that wheel instantaneously, or the balls don't get out to practice. Right. So in an esports related or a content creator perspective, I have a lighting rig that sits on my desk, and I have a very, very specialized U clamp that holds my lighting rig onto my desk.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody doesn't create that, I don't have a lighting rig on my desk.
Right.
And so when we talk to parents and we talk about STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the idea is that esports involves all of these things. We're not replacing esport as a job. We're allowing the passion of esports to encapsulate a child, and then we can find a pathway where their level of passion for gaming and their competency and skill begins to match.
Mm-hmm.
Because
just to follow up on that, like, because you mentioned a little bit about sort of the responsibility of coaches and parents and things like that, not necessarily just trying to make a buck off of these kids, but actually trying to educate them. Like, where do you ultimately see that responsibility coming from? Is it just simply people aren't educated enough to know sort of how to navigate it, or do you think it's just simply people are just trying to only find a way to make a dollar, and so all of the other stuff is kind of getting lost between all of that?
I think that one of the challenges that we face is that I have 5 things racing through my head, and I don't want to be disparaging to anyone in particular. Just give me 2 seconds to make sure I say this fairly. In that, one of the challenges in esports that we face is a lot of organizations are waiting for the most recent pro player to retire in order to hire them as the head coach. Some of them are going to be amazing head coaches. Some of them are going to be terrible. I had one person on social media slam Nash. Oh my goodness, why can't I remember his name? He's Canadian and everything. No, it's not there. Basketball, NBA. Steve Nash. Yes. Oh my goodness. Sorry for the scream. So you've got Steve Nash lands on a team, and the NBA is a very unique ecosystem, and the players have, to frame it as positively as I can, very eccentric personalities.
Right.
And so, people complain that Steve Nash was a terrible coach, but his players wouldn't do what he wanted them to, what he expected them to do as a coach. Like, his players just refused to do what he said. And they said so much as in publicly, we're not going to do what you tell us to do. And it's like, wow. And so we want to call Steve Nash a terrible coach. But I don't think that is necessarily the problem. I think the personalities have become so big. And I don't even think it's the actual personality that's the problem. It's the It's the unchecked personality that says, oh, I'm the superstar, I should be able to say what is what.
Mhm.
When somebody checks that personality at a certain point in the age process, for me, it's like 16 to 24 years old. If I can get into a kid's life and I can begin to massage the very beginning of where your personality gets too big, I'm bigger than the game. No. You are a member of a team, and your participation on this team is what is required in order for your team to win championships. And if you want to be remembered forever in history, it's not the dominant personality that gets remembered in sports.
Mhm.
It's the person who won the championships. Like, it's the team, it's the way in which it was done. And partnership is a big part of that. And so, circling way back to the very beginning, in that these mental health strategies that, when I sit down with a player and we begin to unlock, who am I? Like, how have I been put together? Why does my brain think the way that it thinks? Why do you think differently than me? It isn't, I think we've allowed it to become a you're right, I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong scenario, versus a, oh, wait a second, you're right, but guess what? So am I.
Mhm.
And it isn't about, I have to prove that you're wrong so that I can be right. That's the danger of where everything gets misplaced. There is absolute wrong in this world, and there's absolute right in this world. And your life has had a completely different journey than mine.
Mhm.
Right? I have one of the kids that I coach out of Baltimore. I'm hoping I can get him connected, get him on the show. Amazing kid. I'll call him a kid because I'm 50. He's just turned, I think, 28. But fighter games, and I'm like, he says to me, I can't go out this weekend. I'm like, what's going on? And it was a racial situation. He couldn't go out because his brother's car got shot up driving through Baltimore. I'm like, are you joking me? Like, that actually happens? I don't have a frame. I don't have a way to understand the darkness that exists in communities. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean that I have a solution for it. And so then when I sit down with a player, my job is not to tell a player what they need to do to become X. My job as a coach is to really come alongside and help ask questions, help develop the question, so that we can find the strategy that's going to work for their scenario.
As you're having these conversations with these different people, and kind of, sort of trying to bridge that sort of gap, I guess, how do you see people like respond to it? Like, are they more apt to respond in a way of, like you said, more of you're right, I'm wrong type of thing? Or do you think that slowly but surely, as it sort of develops, more people are starting to sort of do the whole, collaborative, sort of looking at these things the way that you kind of see it?
I think that one of the more dangerous things that's happened in our culture and society, and that it's deeply rooted in esports, and I'll have a very specific example in a second, is tribalism. Is that when I don't listen to your voice, when I don't allow your voice to inform my voice, that's tribalism. And I just stay in my camp, I stay in my circle. There was a study done recently about free-to-play video games. And that, so you take League of Legends, Fortnite, Call of Duty, any Overwatch, any of these games, even Fall Guys, Animal Crossing, like, it goes anywhere, right? Any game that has an internal currency process creates an undiagnosed, and it's an undiagnosed ownership of said game or activity. And that ownership elevates the level of aggression that a player will experience based on how much real money they've invested in an unreal environment. So Fortnite somebody who buys skins every time a new skin comes out. They're like, oh, I gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. They psychologically believe that they're actually purchasing a portion of the game. In World of Warcraft, there was a super famous Twitch streamer and all sorts of stuff, and he would periodically with his fan base, they call them fashion shows, but they're mount reveals. Okay, so in World of Warcraft, similar to any of the games, we have skins. In World of Warcraft, we have mounts. And these are things that are rideable characters to move around the maps.
Right.
And so you had, like, it was a 3x, right? 3 strikes and you're out. And the winner gets to pick one of the mounts out of their catalog, and you had to match that. If you didn't match it, you got an X.
Oh, I see.
And you played against each other. So it was non-violent. It was just, but it was an indication of how much money and time you had invested in the game. And so it created this tier system of superiority in a thing. The same thing can be done in Fortnite, right? You sit in the lobby and we just, hey, I've got this skin. Oh, I have it too. Oh, I have this skin. Oh, I have it too. Oh, I have this skin. You don't have that skin. Oh, I lose, right? And so that it's a game and a game and a game kind of scenario. But the psychology of it is fascinating, because these developers realized, if I can convince people, we'll call them kids, parents, adults, family. I mean, like, I've got nerd money now, right? Like, I'm old and I love video games and I have money. But there's this idea that if I get them to invest in the skins, then they'll understand the value that they have in the game. They'll come back and play the game. Right? When I'm coaching families in Fortnite, as an example, I say, do not buy a single skin for your child. Ever. Force them to play stock skins until they're competent, until they get their first victory royale, as an example. And then you can then create a system that allows them to earn said skins based on the development of their character, based on the development of their access to the game. And so then it breaks down this psychological kind of process of ownership where there's nothing to own.
And so
all Epic has to do.
You're basically just trying to rework the way that they think about the game in a way, or rework the way that they approach, because I mean, like you said, it's sort of easy now for a kid to get on the game, and then if they got the money, automatically can just buy up all of the extras and all of the things without really having to play anything. And I guess that's probably most games at this point.
These are not pay to win games. Right. So there's no actual advantage to having a particular skin. Now, there is some controversy there. Some skins have bigger hitboxes and blah, blah, blah. But most people don't even think that deep into it. So there's the coach in me. It's like, play stock and you'll be fine.
So, like, as far as, like, when you're talking to parents, for example, just video games in general have kind of, changed over the years as far as just how people approach them, how people look at them. When you're talking to parents, what is sort of that conversation like? Because I imagine that's probably obviously different than talking to the actual kid who's actually doing the playing. The parents are probably more, I want them to do A, B, and C. I want them to learn this, learn that. And gaming probably doesn't have any type of correlation to kind of any of that stuff, really. So, like, what is that conversation like, trying to, I guess, bridge that gap between the parents, their kids playing the game, and the game itself, as far as, like, all of how the psychology and stuff works?
So first and foremost, I'm completely biased. One, because I love video games. And two, in 2019, my youngest son had finished his freshman year of high school, and he flops down in the front seat of my car. He's got a backpack full of garbage that came out of his locker, and it's like smelly and stuff. It's just like grade 9 kids or freshman kids are gross. And he flops down. He says, "Hey, Dad, I just want to be very clear. I'm not going to college or university." And the dad in me gets very scared. And I had to, like, switch my hat like literally like just I had to put on a youth worker hat because I've been a youth worker for now 30 years. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what are we gonna do? He says, I'm gonna be a pro esports player. And I'm like, oh, okay. How do I help? So he came home, talked to his mom, and we put a plan together. And so all of my kids have had paper routes their whole childhood, roll them, deliver them, go and collect the money, like stuff like that, just to give them a sense of really doing something that meant something to them. So he had to take his newspaper money, which was all of it, and he had to buy what's known as an emulator for a keyboard and mouse for his PlayStation. And it at the time it was called Zimstick. This is not a sponsored activity, but you know the name of it was a Zimstick, and he had to set up all the settings and stuff. And I said to him, I said, listen, if you can maintain, so he was a GM on PlayStation, which is GM stands for Grandmaster in PlayStation. I said, if you can maintain your rank using the keyboard and mouse for 3 months, I'll buy you a PC. Because if you're going to be a pro esports player, you can't do it from a console. And we went, okay. And so we monitored, we maintained. He still had his paper route, so he was able to get his cash back up. But he did. He maintained his rank using keyboard and mouse on his PlayStation, which is very difficult, to be fair. And so we committed. Middle of September, we bought him a PC. At the time, his sister was going to the local college. And up here in Canada, esports is still fairly new, even in 2019. And her college just spent $5 million on the premium esports arena in Canada. And they have 54 PCs in this huge, it's amazing. It's absolutely a cool spot. And so she created an account for her brother, and I would drive him out to the arena, and we would hang out at night while he was waiting for his PC to be delivered. And he would just play on the PC to just kind of maintain and practice. Well, the Overwatch team shows up, and he's like, can I try out? And can I hang out with you guys? And the coach says, yeah, absolutely. It's an open tryout. Just come play some games. And so the coach is watching all the players, and he's like, interesting. And he leans over to me. He says, how long has your son been playing on PC? I said, well, told him the story that I just told you guys. He goes, really? Because he's probably one of the best kids in the room. I'm like, oh, okay. And so then night 2 comes, and he's placed in a scenario where because he's a very vocal kid, so he places them with the non-vocal players to try to get them to talk and communicate and shot call and stuff. And so he's in there, he's on Route 66, and he's playing Widow, and he jumps straight up out of spawn, and he headshots a guy, and he pulls off his ear cup to hear the guy on the opposite side of him just say, fuck. Hopefully there's no language barriers. But it's like, and the coach just was standing behind him at the time. He just shook his head and walked away. The end of the night. So the first night was Monday. This was Tuesday. The coach comes to me on Tuesday, and he says, hey, have you ever considered taking your son out of school, letting him play esports full time? Because he's hands down the best kid in the room at this game. I can't wait to have him on my team. I said, well, he's only 15. He goes, what? I'm like, yeah, he's 15 years old. He says, well, then you need to get him out of school now. And I had not considered the idea of homeschooling or anything like that. Well, I get up Wednesday morning, and I'm opening up my Facebook, because that's what all us old people do. And I'm scrolling through Facebook, and Gary Vaynerchuk is doing one of his classic rants with his videographer at the time, D-Rock. And he says, hey, D-Rock, you were homeschooled, right? And D-Rock says, yes. And Gary V turns, snaps right back into the camera, and he says, F education. And I'm like, what? What is going on here?
Right. Yeah.
And like 3
you're
hours.
You're not really hearing that too many places, for sure.
No, but clearly my phone did. Right? The whole conspiracy. Yeah. And so then 3 hours later, I get an ad for a methodology known as unschooling. where you allow the child to define the learning opportunities.
Hmm.
And I talked to my wife. I talked to my son's mom and my wife, and we decide that we're going to offer him this opportunity. So we go back to tryouts. He rocks it again. So we're at the end of the tryouts. We sit down, and because I wanted my wife to come with so she could see what it's like. Because she doesn't play video games. She doesn't like video games. She thinks they're a waste of time.
Right.
But I show how her son played in this space with all these other players, and she kind of got a glimpse of it. So we sat him down at the end of the thing, and I said, so coach says you're really good. What do you think about coming home and playing esports full time? Yes. Like it was instant.
Mm-hmm.
And so by September 26th of 2019, we had pulled him out of school, and I homeschooled him. And 6 months later, everybody was pulled out of school because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of my launch into esports. And then as a dad, so that's a super long story. I apologize.
It's all good.
It's long, but the bias part of me is, not every parent's going to have the means or the ability to pull their kid out of school to play video games.
Right.
But when I talk to a parent, a lot of times we have this imbalance in the relationship that the parent wants the child to engage in their world. So when the parent has chores to do, when the parent wants you to talk at dinner, when the parent wants you to come out of your bedroom, there's a whole litany of things, and the kid's like, how's your day at school? Right? Can you do your chores? Right? Like there's very little relationship. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing we do is we coach the parents on how to build into a child's life. And the most famous question a parent can ask a child, one is to know what game they're playing. Mm-hmm. Two, know when the most recent patch notes are released. And then all the parent has to do is say, hey, I saw that there was a new update to your game. What's the meta going to look like? The parent doesn't have to know what meta means.
Right.
But that child will now talk to you for 2 hours in a language that you know nothing about. But that child will feel heard and feel engaged and feel important. And then when you say, hey, can you help me with the garbage? Help me is the key word. You're not telling them to do it. You're inviting them into that process with you. Then there's an exchange and an engagement. Mm-hmm. Because you stepped into their world. You didn't expect them to step out of theirs to engage with you. And this is part of the whole parenting dynamic that is shifting. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the core things my wife and I do when we do, marriage and parenting coaching and such.
Where do you see opportunities for maybe some of these venture capitalists or the people that have all of the money? Like where do you see the opportunity to be able to kind of assist with that? I mean, how do we kind of get down the line to where that's not necessarily a barrier for entry? Maybe it's just a whole thing of the parent, obviously you kind of got to navigate that dynamic because you're basically telling people to change, basically. And obviously, as we know, that's not really the easiest thing to do. So how do you see us kind of getting past that barrier of entry? Is it just some of these people just realizing, hey, it's bigger than just, dollars and cents. It's just, one of these things.
It's so much bigger.
Yeah.
It's so much bigger than dollars and cents. Yeah. I apologize for cutting you off there. Mm-hmm. It's so much bigger than dollars and cents. We're talking about human lives. We're talking about the nature of what it means to be engaged in our culture and society in a positive manner. Mm-hmm. And I think that, if one parent out of every school district that's listening to this podcast could take up the challenge of going and asking the athletics, hey, have you ever considered esports as an option? Mm-hmm. There's such a massive opportunity to just have some kind of a club, even an intramural. It doesn't even have to be varsity. You could just run an intramural, a couple of schools getting together at lunchtime to talk about video games. And then all of a sudden we can start populating those spaces with coaches because parents might want to get involved. The teacher goes, well, heck, I've been playing Fortnite since it launched. I've been playing it in secret. Nobody knows. but all of a sudden that teacher or parent has something to offer, and it doesn't mean pulling the kid out of school. It actually will bring the kid back into school, because they've been checked out forever, because the school's like, they're not doing anything in esports. All I want to do is do something in esports. So I'm going to wait till I finish school, or I'm going to drop out of school and go and work on my capacity skills. We need more families and more people to engage in the educational process, where esports can be presented as a viable option. If there were, and I would say, like, your venture capitalist is trying to recoup their money, but if we could have a little bit more philanthropy, where people are willing to donate and give. There's a great organization in Kansas. Bubba is the guy's name, and he's running it. And basically what he does is, if you're a school administrator and you want to add an esports lab to your school, you phone him, he helps gather up the funding from your local region, and then they get 6 PCs and put those in your school so that you can have an esports lab.
Nice.
Unreal, right? And he's doing this in all kinds of schools, right? There's the high school esports league, does something very, very similar. Generation Esports does something very, very similar, in that they'll help schools build the capacity to have these labs in place so that kids have a place to go, right? I had a conversation with a senior vice president at one time, in relation to pro players, and he was saying the biggest struggle he sees in his pro players, and he would say, he's a venture capitalist, so he's not an esports guy, he's a money guy. And he says, when I'm signing contracts with players, I am seeing 80-90% of these kids coming from single parent families, impoverished environments. They've been bullied, have traumatic histories of some way, shape, or form, and esports was their only way out. Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, gaming is a release for a lot of people. I mean,
It is a huge release.
Yeah. And so just tying the fact that you can have that sort of release, that sort of, you can kind of dive into whatever world it is that you're kind of diving into, and also make a living off of that. It can be very appealing to a lot of people. Like, I mean, especially if they've been through all of those traumatic experiences and whatnot. Last question for you. As we sort of, 2023 and beyond, like, what do you see the future looking like for, especially like with coaching, especially for, more people getting involved, more people, I guess, starting to finally realize the power that, gaming and esports can have on, kids' lives and, just people in general. Like, how do you see that sort of working out? Like, what do you think is on like the cusp for the industry as a whole, and kind of what you do as far as coaching and helping people out?
There's so much to unpack there. And I mean, I haven't even touched my personal philosophy of coaching and kind of how I approach it. And there certainly isn't enough time left here to do that. So I'm just going to,
so it's all good.
I'm going to encourage your audience to click that like button, share the heck out of this video, and just send messages and just say, hey, I need a part 2 to that, because I want to know what are the actual steps to move from where I am today into an actual career in esports. And there's a very definitive map as to how to get there. And I think that what we need are, and like, I just finished writing a coaching curriculum, and it was so hilarious. So I've got a 1-year coach's curriculum that includes an internship. So if you want to coach in esports, I want to coach you on how to coach in esports. We're going to develop your own philosophy, your own approach, your own game, your own stuff. And then we're going to put you in an internship environment with high school kids or college kids, where you actually get to practice that philosophy for 4 months. And then we're going to look at how do we create traction and spaces for there to be healthy coaching. If you've got a degree or any kind of schooling within the educational field, and you want to add coaching into your athletics approach, you could be a high school esports coach, get paid as an educator to be in a high school, and you will be the most favorite teacher on the entire campus. because you play video games with kids. And that is, it's like a terrible thing to say coming out of your mouth, because you play video games. My wife was arguing with me some time ago, and she's like, I just, I wish you would play less video games. And I went, excuse me? I don't play video games. I'm 50. I have to build competency. I have to just not die every 4 seconds so that my clients will listen to me, right? I have to have a certain win percentage in Fortnite. I have to have a certain rank in League of Legends. I don't play Call of Duty because I'm just cannon fodder when it comes to that game. But it's like, and I'm like, love, I'm working. Like this is my job. This is what I do to work. And so, what we need are high school coaches. What we need are grassroots organizations that are willing to come together as a nonprofit. And I mean that legitimately. Come in as a nonprofit, support the activities of kids, just like big brothers and big sisters, just like the local soccer, the local wrestling club, or anything else. Charge a nominal fee for kids to participate and just provide a space for them to play. And if we can have healthy philosophies, healthy approaches to coaching, and we come alongside kids and families, we actually can make a difference in their lives. And I mean, we've got like 80% of colleges and universities throughout the United States that are now offering full ride scholarships if you can play a video game. Now, if you've played Overwatch, you know what gold is, okay? If you can get into Diamond, you can get a $40,000 a year scholarship to go to school. If you can get from gold to Diamond. Diamond is like middle tier. It's not even, you will never see pro. Pros are like top 500. Like they're way, way, way higher. But these college and university goes, we need to get kids in. And so we're going to have a Diamond team. We're going to have a GM, a master's team and a GM team. And the higher rank your kids are at these games, the better opportunity they have to actually have a college or university education. And that's incredible, right? And this is where, when we bridge esports and STEM education together, we encapsulate the passion of gaming and we put it with the skill development of who we are as people, right? And now all of a sudden you have very passionate people that are building clamps for lighting rigs to attach to desks. And you're like, I never knew I was going to be in esports, but now you're sitting in the back corner of the League of Legends World Championship, and there's more people watching this than they watch the Super Bowl. And you get to stand in the back corner to make sure nothing breaks. That's a cool opportunity. There's no kid that right now, if I told you in 10 years you could be at the back corner of a League of Legends World Championship, you would say, nah. There's not a kid that plays League of Legends, or maybe somebody else, right? But if you play League of Legends or Call of Duty or any world champion, like there's not a kid on the planet that doesn't play that game today that would give up that opportunity. Right. And so I think that there is a phenomenal opportunity to kind of see us inhabit the educational space and to provide an opportunity for kids to engage back into school. Right. And that's a big deal. I want to drop 2 tips. And I talk about this all the time. And I just connected with a pro Fortnite player. Okay. I have 2 tips for parents out there. Don't show this to your kids. This is where you stop the video and you don't, because I want you, the parent, I want you to be your kid's superhero. Okay. So there's 2 things you can do when it comes to Fortnite. And I love this. There's a gratitude model in Fortnite. Okay. Have you played Fortnite before?
I played a little bit. Fortnite. I'm more of a Call of Duty player than Fortnite. So.
Okay. So the second tip's going to help you then. The second tip's going to help you for sure. But in Fortnite, if you can put a mark on the map and thank the bus driver with your emote button, the bus driver will give you a customized honk when to jump out of the bus. My pro player says, are you sure? I'm like, I am absolutely sure. He didn't even know. And he was got paid to play Fortnite. Pro. Tip number 1, put a mark, thank the bus driver, and it's beep, beep, beep. It's a customizable, and it'll happen at the most opportune time to land efficiently on your mark. Love it. It's one of my best tips. The second one is pure psychology. If you play in a battle royale that has a shrinking map, well, let me ask you this first. Are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
You're right-handed. So 86% of the population is actually right-handed.
Right.
And you have an autonomic, which means you don't even think about it. When you're playing video games, you move clockwise in relation to the shrinking map. So the next time you jump off that plane, you watch yourself, you will automatically move. You'll want to move from left to right. You're going to want to, or sorry, from right to left. That's the clockwise motion, I think. Whatever. Depends on which way you're looking at the clock, I guess.
Yeah.
But you're going to move clockwise. If you can train your brain to move counterclockwise, now people are running at you instead of running away from you.
Gotcha.
You have an optimum moment within the gunfight because they're not expecting you to be in front of them. They expect you to be behind them.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
just, closing in on that. So like those 2 tips, gratitude in Fortnite, thank the bus driver, put a mark, get a honk. And then in the battle royales, if you can train your brain to allow yourself to move counterclockwise around the map, you will have the advantage in every gunfight.